Chidinma was a woman who rarely bothered with cooking. Laziness had become a defining part of her life, and she relied heavily on buying food from any place she saw, without considering how it was prepared. One afternoon, she walked past a local restaurant and decided to buy amla. She was hungry, and the aroma was too tempting to resist. But what she saw in her bowl was shocking. Among the pieces of meat, there was something that looked like a piece of pant. The sight made her recoil in horror, nearly causing her to faint. That day, she realized how dangerous careless eating could be. She had survived a near-tragic experience, and the lesson was unforgettable. The incident left her shaken, but it also awakened her awareness. She began to notice how vendors handled food, the cleanliness of utensils, and whether ingredients were fresh or stored properly. Flies buzzing around, unwashed hands, and uncovered ingredients no longer escaped her attention. Chidinma realized that survival depended on vigilance and careful observation. Convenience could never outweigh health. Each choice she made about food now required thought and attention. Chidinma's transformation did not happen overnight. She slowly began to cook simple meals at home, learning to enjoy the process. Rice, beans, vegetables, and eventually pounded yam became her new routine. The kitchen, once intimidating, became a place of empowerment. Cooking at home offered safety, taste, and pride in a way street food never could. Friends and family noticed her change, and some even sought her advice on preparing meals hygienically. Sharing her knowledge became a source of purpose, a way to protect others from harm. Her vigilance extended beyond food. Chidinma observed hygiene in every aspect of her life, from handwashing to safe storage of ingredients. She resisted peer pressure and the temptations of street food, relying on the vivid memory of the amla incident to guide her. Each refusal strengthened her self-discipline. Her friends initially teased her, but they began to respect her choices, seeing the tangible benefits of her caution. Chidinma also became aware of her influence on the community. She shared her story in small gatherings, community centers, and workplaces. Parents and young people began asking for her guidance. Vendors started improving hygiene practices, covering food, and cleaning utensils. Chidinma realized that one person's caution could ripple outward, protecting many from preventable illness. Her painful experience had become a tool for education, awareness, and empowerment. The temptations of old habits occasionally returned. The smell of fried plantain, grilled meat, and steaming jollof rice sometimes tested her resolve. Yet, the memory of her near disaster was stronger than desire. Every moment of self-control reinforced her confidence and sense of responsibility. She understood that vigilance was not temporary, it was a lifelong practice. Chidinma extended her teachings to children, demonstrating safe food practices and hygiene in schools and community gatherings. Her story captivated young listeners, emphasizing the real dangers of careless eating. She instilled habits of hand-washing, safe food handling, and awareness, ensuring that her lessons would benefit the next generation. Over time, Chidinma reflected on the benefits of her disciplined approach. Her health improved, her mind felt clearer, and she experienced a sense of empowerment that had been absent in her previous lifestyle. Cooking at home, observing hygiene, and teaching others became part of her daily routine. She understood that vigilance and careful choices were not burdens but tools for a safer, healthier, and more fulfilling life. Even when confronted with peer pressure or social gatherings that encouraged street food, Chidinma remained steadfast. Her transformation inspired admiration and respect from friends, family, and co-workers. People recognized her discipline and sought her advice. Chidinma realized that personal vigilance could influence an entire community, creating a ripple effect of awareness and responsibility. One day, she returned to the restaurant where the amla incident had occurred. She felt the familiar tension in her stomach but also gratitude for how far she had come. Her carelessness had once put her at serious risk, but now she had the knowledge, discipline, and vigilance to navigate life safely. That memory no longer caused panic, it served as a reminder and guide. Chidinma began documenting her experiences, creating simple guides on safe food practices. She wanted her story to leave a legacy of awareness and caution for generations to come. She understood that what started as a personal trauma could be transformed into education, empowerment, and protection for others. Her journey taught her that life constantly tests individuals with temptation, convenience, and ignorance. Laziness can be dangerous, and one careless choice can have life-altering consequences. But knowledge, vigilance, and responsibility empower people to make safer, smarter decisions. Chidinma had learned, lived, and shared this ultimate lesson: awareness and careful action are the keys to survival, health, and empowerment. She smiled, grateful that what began as a terrifying incident had become a lifelong guide, not only for herself but for everyone who would hear her story. Chidinma realized that the safest way to protect herself was to learn to cook properly. She started with simple meals: rice, beans, and vegetables. At first, she struggled with timing, seasoning, and preparation. The kitchen felt foreign and intimidating, a stark contrast to the carefree days of buying food from anywhere. Yet, each successful meal filled her with pride. She realized that taking responsibility for her own nourishment was not just about safety, it was about empowerment and self-respect. As days passed, her confidence grew. She began experimenting with more complex dishes like pounded yam and yudu, recreating flavors she had loved from street vendors, but with strict hygiene and care. She carefully washed her hands, cleaned the kitchen surfaces, and stored leftovers properly. Each meal became a small victory, a reminder that she could survive and thrive without relying on risky street food. Cooking at home became her shield against illness and a testament to the lessons she had painfully learned. Chidinma's friends soon noticed her transformation and started asking for advice. She shared her experience, explaining the dangers of careless eating, unhygienic stalls, and improper food handling. She emphasized simple habits: washing hands, checking ingredients, cooking at home, and avoiding exposed or uncovered food. Her story became a cautionary tale, one that friends and colleagues remembered whenever they considered buying from an unfamiliar vendor. Chidinma's influence grew beyond casual advice. People began visiting her home to learn simple, safe cooking techniques. She taught them how to prepare basic meals hygienically and encouraged them to think critically about what they ate. Her trauma had become a tool for change. By sharing her experience, she realized that personal mistakes could be transformed into lessons that protected others. Every person she helped reinforced the importance of vigilance and responsibility. One day, while running errands, Chidinma noticed a vendor selling amla at an unusually low price. The aroma was tempting, and a part of her old habits whispered, "It's cheap, quick, and tasty, why not?" But she observed the setup carefully. The vendor's cooking area was filthy, pots were unclean, and flies were everywhere. Her stomach churned at the sight. She remembered the horrifying incident of the pants in her soup and the terror it had caused. With a deep breath, she turned away. The temptation was strong, but her awareness was stronger. This encounter reinforced the lesson: vigilance must be constant. Convenience and price can never outweigh safety. Chidinma realized that life would constantly present temptations to revert to old habits, but the knowledge and discipline she had gained were powerful tools to resist them. She felt pride in her self-control, knowing she had survived once and could prevent future harm through awareness. The experience reminded her that caution was a daily practice, not a one-time lesson. Chidinma began teaching her family the habits she had learned. She insisted that her siblings wash their hands before meals, check the cleanliness of ingredients, and avoid buying food from questionable sources. At first, they teased her about being too careful, but she remained patient, sharing her story in detail. When they saw the seriousness of her message, especially the panic and fear she had endured, they began to take her advice seriously. Chidinma realized that teaching her family was as important as teaching herself. Through these efforts, she saw a transformation in her household. Meals were prepared safely, food handling became hygienic, and her family became more aware of potential risks. Chidinma felt empowered knowing that her painful experience could prevent harm to her loved ones. She understood that personal responsibility extended beyond herself. It was about protecting those around her as well. Her story had grown from a life-altering lesson into a foundation for healthy living within her family. Chidinma now understood that vigilance was more than caution, it was a strength. Every time she walked past a street vendor, she analyzed the environment carefully: hygiene, food storage, and cooking practices. She no longer relied on aroma or appearance alone. The Omla incident had instilled a permanent awareness that guided her decisions daily. Laziness and convenience no longer had power over her; knowledge, observation, and responsibility did. She began to reflect on her past carelessness with a mixture of fear and gratitude. Fear, because she realized how close she had come to serious illness or worse. Gratitude, because the experience had forced her to grow, change, and gain control over her life. Chidinma now viewed every meal as a decision with potential consequences. Her life was no longer defined by convenience but by awareness, careful choices, and responsibility. She knew that one lapse could undo all her progress. Vigilance had become her armor, protecting her health, her family, and her future. Chidinma continued to refine her cooking skills. She experimented with new dishes, ensuring that everything was prepared hygienically and safely. She found joy in the process and discovered that cooking could be both rewarding and empowering. The fear she had once felt when thinking about street food was replaced by confidence in her abilities. She realized that taking control of her meals gave her both safety and independence. Her vigilance extended to observing others. She noticed how people interacted with food vendors, often buying food without questioning hygiene. She felt a mix of frustration and responsibility. Frustration because people were risking their health unnecessarily, and responsibility because she could help. She began gently advising strangers, sharing tips on how to identify clean and safe food sources. Her efforts were small, but she knew that even one person following her guidance could make a difference. Chidinma's friends often tried to tempt her with street food. One afternoon, they insisted on buying snacks from a vendor known for cheap prices. The aroma was enticing, and her old habits momentarily stirred. But the memory of the Omla incident was vivid in her mind. She politely declined, explaining the importance of hygiene and safety. Her friends were surprised but eventually respected her decision. Chidinma realized that true change required consistent action, even when convenience or peer pressure tempted her. She began organizing small educational sessions in her community. Children and adults alike listened attentively as she shared her experiences, emphasizing the dangers of careless eating. She demonstrated simple ways to cook safely at home and highlighted the importance of washing hands and utensils. Her story resonated with many, and people began asking her for advice on maintaining hygiene in their own kitchens. Chidinma felt proud, knowing that her past trauma was transforming into a tool for awareness and education. One day, Chidinma encountered a young boy eating from a street vendor. Rainwater had splashed onto the food, and flies buzzed around freely. She rushed toward him, grabbing his arm gently. "Stop! Don't eat that," she shouted. The boy froze, confused. Chidinma explained the dangers of contaminated food and improper handling, recounting her own near-fatal experience with the Omla. His mother arrived, shocked, and thanked her for intervening. Chidinma realized that vigilance wasn't just about protecting herself, it could save others too. Chidinma also focused on observing minute details. She noticed whether utensils were washed properly, whether hands were clean, and how ingredients were stored. Observation became her daily skill. Even when eating at home, she applied the same careful scrutiny. She understood that danger often lurks in details that people overlook, and that awareness could prevent serious consequences. Her community began recognizing her as a voice of caution. People admired her discipline and commitment. Parents brought their children to her sessions, and coworkers sought her advice before trying new vendors. Chidinma realized that sharing knowledge amplified the impact of her experience. Her shocking incident had become a lesson that could influence many lives positively. Chidinma's resolve was occasionally tested. One evening, the smell of jollof rice and grilled chicken from a street vendor tempted her. For a brief moment, she considered giving in, but she remembered the panic she had felt during the umlo incident. That memory strengthened her resolve. She declined politely, reinforcing the principle that vigilance must be consistent. Her self-discipline had become a shield, protecting her health and well-being. Over time, Chidinma focused on educating children. She visited schools and community centers, teaching simple habits like washing hands, checking food, and cooking safely. She shared her story in ways that were easy to understand, emphasizing the real dangers of carelessness. The children listened intently, absorbing lessons that could prevent future mistakes. Chidinma felt a deep sense of purpose, knowing that her story could shape the next generation's choices. Chidinma reflected on how far she had come. Food was no longer just about taste or convenience, it was about safety, responsibility, and mindfulness. Every meal, every vendor visit, and every tip shared became part of a new philosophy: life is precious and requires careful decisions. Her friends and family noticed her transformation. She had become disciplined, vigilant, and empowered. Chidinma realized that life constantly tests individuals with temptation and ignorance, and how one responds determines their safety and future. Chidinma's vigilance extended beyond the kitchen. She observed food markets, carefully analyzing hygiene practices. Many vendors left ingredients uncovered or neglected basic cleanliness, yet customers bought food blindly. Chidinma took it upon herself to inform others, pointing out simple precautions. People began listening and adopting better habits. She understood that knowledge without action was useless, vigilance required consistent practice. Her commitment to safe eating influenced her colleagues at work. She shared her story and practical tips, helping them recognize risky practices. Some coworkers were initially skeptical, but Chidinma's sincerity convinced them to take precautions. Over time, habits changed. Handwashing increased, vendors were chosen more carefully, and people became more aware of potential risks. Chidinma realized that personal vigilance could inspire community-wide change. Even when confronted with peer pressure, Chidinma remained steadfast. Friends encouraged her to try popular street food, but she politely declined. She explained the importance of hygiene and safety. Her friends respected her choice, impressed by her consistency and courage. Chidinma understood that resisting temptation required not just knowledge, but discipline, courage, and application. Each decision reinforced her character and commitment to a healthier life. Chidinma continued sharing her story, demonstrating safe cooking practices in schools, community centers, and gatherings. Children and adults listened carefully, learning habits that would protect them from careless eating. Her personal trauma had become a powerful educational tool, shaping habits and awareness for the community. She felt proud, knowing that her experiences could prevent harm and empower others. Chidinma realized that vigilance extended beyond just food. She began applying the lessons she had learned to other areas of life: personal hygiene, shopping, and even interactions with people she didn't know well. Every decision became deliberate, guided by awareness and responsibility. This new perspective made her feel empowered. She no longer relied on luck or convenience, she relied on knowledge, observation, and careful action. Her near-fatal experience with the umlaw had taught her that life could change in an instant, and prevention was always better than cure. Chidinma understood that vigilance was not just a habit, it was a lifestyle that protected her, her family, and everyone around her. Chidinma's transformation inspired those around her. Friends, family, and coworkers began asking for advice on safe eating practices, cooking techniques, and hygiene habits. She happily shared her experience, emphasizing that one careless choice could have severe consequences. Her story encouraged people to be more mindful of their decisions. Parents became more cautious about what their children ate, young adults learned to question the hygiene of food vendors, and some street sellers even improved their practices. Chidinma realized that a single life lesson, when shared, could influence many lives. She felt proud that her experience had transformed into a source of guidance and inspiration for her community. Chidinma looked back on her life before the Omla incident. She remembered the laziness, the carelessness, and the disregard for hygiene. The memory made her shudder. Now, she was disciplined, cautious, and vigilant in every aspect of life. Cooking at home, observing hygiene, and educating others had become second nature. Her transformation was not just about food safety, it was about personal growth. Chidinma understood that experience, even when frightening or unpleasant, could lead to empowerment. She had taken what could have been a life-altering disaster and turned it into a journey of awareness, responsibility, and influence. Her life had changed for the better, and she knew she would never take her safety or her health for granted again. Chidinma began thinking about the long-term impact of her journey. She realized that the lessons she had learned were not just for herself, they could benefit generations. She started documenting her experiences, creating simple guides on safe food practices and hygiene. Her goal was to leave a legacy of awareness and caution that others could follow. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment knowing that her story, born out of a terrifying experience, had grown into something meaningful. By teaching, guiding, and inspiring others, she ensured that her painful lesson would prevent harm and encourage responsibility for years to come. Chidinma had transformed from a careless eater into a guardian of health and safety in her community. Chidinma realized that vigilance extended beyond just meals. She carefully analyzed every vendor, every ingredient, and every interaction. She refused to take chances with convenience. The memory of the Omla incident was a constant reminder of how quickly careless eating could lead to disaster. Each careful decision became a reaffirmation of her discipline and awareness. One afternoon, she passed a street filled with vendors selling fried snacks, suya, and steaming hot meals. The aroma was tempting, and a part of her old self, the lazy, careless eater, whispered, "Just one bite won't hurt." For a fleeting moment, she hesitated, but she quickly remembered the terror she had felt during her near disaster. The memory strengthened her resolve, and she walked past the vendor without giving in. Chidinma spent time at the local market, not as a shopper, but as an observer and guide. She noticed several vendors who neglected hygiene, leaving food exposed to flies and dust. Customers, unaware of the risks, bought food blindly. Chidinma felt a sense of responsibility stir within her. She walked among the stalls, politely advising people on what to watch for when buying food. She shared simple tips: avoid exposed ingredients, check for cleanliness, and prefer cooked food stored safely. Many listened attentively, some expressing shock at how careless they had been. Chidinma realized that vigilance was contagious. By teaching others, she could prevent harm and influence safe practices in her community. Her journey of awareness had transformed her into a voice of caution that others could rely on. Chidinma developed a daily routine that prioritized health, safety, and hygiene. She woke early to prepare fresh meals, washed her hands frequently, and carefully stored leftovers. Even when pressed for time, she refused to compromise on these practices. The routine became second nature, a protective shield against carelessness and poor choices. This discipline extended beyond food. Chidinma noticed that other aspects of life, from cleanliness at home to careful decision-making in work and relationships, benefited from vigilance and structure. She realized that consistent routines could prevent crises and build resilience. Each meal she prepared and every careful choice she made reinforced her awareness and commitment to safety. Chidinma had transformed her lifestyle, proving that vigilance and discipline are not burdens but tools for a healthier, safer, and more empowered life. Chidinma began noticing the ripple effect of her vigilance and teachings. Friends and neighbors who once ignored hygiene now checked food vendors carefully. Families discussed safe food practices at home. Even some street vendors had improved their habits, covering ingredients and maintaining cleaner cooking spaces. Chidinma felt proud that her personal experience was creating community-wide awareness. She understood that one person's caution could influence many others, preventing illness and promoting responsible behavior. The lesson she had learned painfully had grown into something much larger, a movement of mindfulness and safety. Chidinma realized that personal vigilance, when shared and practiced consistently, could save lives and build a healthier, more aware society. Chidinma's old habits sometimes tempted her. One afternoon, the smell of street food made her mouth water. Memories of laziness and convenience whispered that a single bite would be harmless. But she remembered the fear and panic of the omelette incident. That memory was stronger than desire. She walked past the food stall, refusing temptation. Her self-control had become a defining part of her character. She continued teaching her children and younger members of the community about food hygiene. She demonstrated washing hands before meals, checking ingredients, and cooking safely. Her story, though frightening, captivated listeners, impressing upon them the importance of careful eating. Chidinma felt fulfillment knowing that her past mistakes could guide others toward better choices. Chidinma reflected on her growth. She had moved from laziness and carelessness to vigilance, discipline, and empowerment. Cooking at home, observing hygiene, educating others, these practices became a way of life. She understood that life constantly presents choices, and every decision carries consequences. Awareness, responsibility, and action were essential tools for survival and health. She returned to the restaurant where the omelette incident had occurred. The memory of that day was vivid, the piece of pant, the shock, the near panic. Yet, instead of fear, she felt gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons learned and for the transformation it had sparked in her life. She realized that her past carelessness had shaped her into a stronger, wiser, and more cautious person. Chidinma began documenting her experiences, creating simple guides for safe food handling. She wanted to leave a legacy of caution and awareness for future generations. Her life had become a testament to the power of vigilance and the impact of lessons learned from personal mistakes. She understood that education and guidance could prevent harm and save lives. Her journey taught her that life is fragile, and one careless decision can lead to serious consequences. Laziness, convenience, and ignorance are temptations, but knowledge and vigilance empower people to make safer, wiser choices. Chidinma had learned, lived, and shared this ultimate lesson. Awareness and careful action are keys to survival, health, and empowerment. She smiled, knowing that her terrifying experience had transformed into a lifelong guide, not just for herself, but for everyone who would hear her story.